The galaxy was on fire. Stars exploded in the night sky like cursed fireworks, leaving trails of smoke and death behind them. The once proud fleets of the Galactic Federation, a coalition of species built on peace and unity, were scattered, defeated, broken. Planetary defenses fell in mere days. Whole worlds consumed by the ruthless, unrelenting advance of the Xanthe Empire. There were no more alliances to call upon, no more hope left. Only the scorched remnants of what had once been civilizations, now swallowed by the flames of war. In the heart of the Federation's last bastion, on a station orbiting a dying star, the leaders gathered, some in despair, others in cold determination. Admiral Jessica stood before them, her face drawn and tired. The weight of command had never felt heavier than in this moment, as the last remnants of the fleet she commanded were lost in skirmishes across the galaxy. The Xanthe Empire had crushed her defenses on every front, and their advance was unstoppable. Jessa didn't believe in miracles, but as she stared at the hollow eyes of the council members, some of whom had been her mentors, she couldn't help but wonder if one had arrived, though not in the form they expected. The silence was unbearable until a low hum vibrated through the room. Her comms officer's voice cut through the tension. "Admiral, we picked up an unidentified warship on the edge of the Hejira system. It's unlike anything we've ever seen." The officers around her muttered. Skeptical glances exchanged, but Jessa felt her pulse quicken. "How long until we can make contact?" "Unknown, Admiral. The ship is not responding to our hails. It's moving closer." An odd sense of urgency settled over her. There was no time to waste. She turned, her commander's instincts kicking in. "Activate our defenses and prepare to track its movements. Let's see if it's a friend or foe." For hours they waited, tension rising as the warship drew closer, its silhouette barely visible on their long-range scanners. But the closer it got, the more their sensors struggled to make sense of it. It wasn't like anything the Federation had encountered before, massive, angular, and utterly unlike the sleek, elegant designs of galactic ships. Its hull seemed thick, almost indestructible, yet it glinted with an unknown technology that none of them could identify. As it crossed the threshold of the Hejira system, Jessa's comms officer spoke again, a trace of fear in his voice. "Admiral, it's opening fire." She froze, heart racing. "What?" The screens flashed, a burst of bright light cutting across the black void of space. A sudden explosion rippled outward from a Xanthe destroyer that had been lurking on the outskirts of the system. The warship's first strike had been swift and precise. The Xanthe fleet, caught off guard, scrambled for evasive action. Jessa was speechless. No one fired with such accuracy, such speed. No fleet had the capability to destroy a ship so efficiently, not even the Federation's finest. Yet this single warship, seemingly out of nowhere, had torn through their enemies like paper. And it wasn't done yet. The warship's relentless assault continued, each volley of energy blasts landing perfectly on their targets. The Xanthe Empire's advanced ships, once thought invincible, were obliterated in seconds. Jessa's mind raced. Was this a Federation ship? No Federation vessel would strike like this, with such ruthlessness. And then a transmission crackled through her comms, breaking the silence with a single defiant message. "We've come to win your war." The voice was unmistakably human. Jessa's hand tightened around the console. "Human?" she whispered, barely believing her own words. There hadn't been a human presence in the galaxy for centuries, not since their species was lost to time, presumed eradicated during the early days of the galactic conflicts. And yet here it was, one lone human ship, wreaking havoc among the Xanthe fleets. "Who are they?" one of the officers asked. "I don't know," Jessa replied, her voice shaking. "But I intend to find out." The human ship, still unresponsive to their attempts at communication, continued its battle, effortlessly dismantling the Xanthe forces one by one. The Federation's few remaining ships stood in awe, watching as the warship took on the entire enemy fleet with almost reckless efficiency. It wasn't just a ship, it was a statement, a defiance of the odds, a symbol of something larger. It was a hand of fate reaching down into the chaos, and Jessa realized it wasn't just the Federation's hope that had been reignited. The entire galaxy was watching. But for all its ferocity, Jessa knew the battle was only just beginning. If this mysterious human warship was here to stay, what did it mean? Was it an ally, or had the war just taken on an even more dangerous dimension? Could they trust this force, with its unknown origins and brutal power, to help them, or would it turn on them as quickly as it had the Empire? In the silence that followed the destruction of Xanthe's last remaining ships in the system, Jessa stared out into the dark expanse, feeling the weight of uncertainty pressed down on her chest. The fire was still burning, but now perhaps there was a chance for the galaxy to rise from the ashes. But what part would humanity play in this new chapter of the war? The question lingered, and the answer was out there somewhere beyond the reach of their sensors. But one thing was certain: they were no longer alone. Admiral Jessa Kale sat in the command chair, her fingers resting lightly on the console. The warship, the human warship, was still hovering in orbit above the shattered remains of the Xanthe fleet, like a massive shadow cast upon a dying sun. For hours, there had been no further contact from the mysterious vessel. No more broadcasts, no more answers. Just the unsettling hum of the ship's engines and the image of its enormous, impenetrable hull. She rubbed her temples, exhausted from the weight of decisions that could determine the fate of billions. The Federation was no longer a united front. It was a collection of desperate survivors clinging to the edges of a galaxy teetering on the brink of annihilation. And now, the singular human ship had come, its unknown capabilities wreaking havoc on the Xanthe Empire's forces, yet providing no explanation for its actions or existence. Admiral, the voice of her calm's officer broke through her thoughts. The human warship is responding. Her breath caught in her throat. On screen, the screen flickered, and there it was, a human, a man, standing in a dimly lit room. The image was static and distorted, but Jessa could still make out his features. Young, with dark hair and a fierce, unwavering gaze. He wore the uniform of a military officer, though nothing that resembled the sleek, standard Federation attire. His expression was unreadable, but his voice was calm, almost unsettlingly so. "This is Captain Aiden Pierce of the USS Vanguard. If you're receiving this message, then we've succeeded in breaking through the Empire's blockade. The war is far from over, but we've delivered a blow to their forces. If you wish to join us, then prepare yourselves." Jessa's brow furrowed. The name of the ship, the Vanguard, was unfamiliar, but the man, Captain Pierce, was too calm, too direct. "Join us," Jessa repeated under her breath. What did he mean? They had nothing to offer. The Federation's fleet was scattered, its resources exhausted. And yet, this captain spoke as if the galaxy's fate was already sealed, like humanity's warship had the power to tip the balance in ways no one had imagined. "We are here to fight," Captain Pierce continued, his voice steady, though an undercurrent of something colder. "We've studied the Xanthe Empire, their strategies, their weaknesses. We've been tracking their movements for months, and we know how to stop them. But we can't do it alone." Jessa felt a surge of something, maybe hope, maybe fear. "How do we know we can trust you?" she asked, her voice cutting through the static. The captain's face softened for a moment, his eyes narrowing in what seemed like understanding. "You don't, but I don't need your trust. I need your cooperation." He paused, letting the words settle in the air between them. "The Xanthe Empire has no mercy. They've taken everything from us, our home, our people, but you're still here. The war isn't over for you. Not yet." The transmission cut off, leaving Jessa in stunned silence. She glanced around the room at the officers, their faces a mix of confusion and disbelief. Was this human captain serious? Could they really trust someone so blunt? "I don't like this," muttered Commander Talvik, a Federation veteran with a reputation for skepticism. "A single warship shows up and gives orders as if they're the ones in charge." "I know," Jessa replied, her voice a whisper. "But they've already demonstrated power we can't ignore." Talvik grimaced. "And they're asking us to follow their lead? To what end?" Jessa stood from her chair, pacing. "We don't have the luxury of time to question every move. We've lost everything. If this ship can really stop the Xanthe Empire, we need to at least consider the possibility that they're our best shot at survival. But at what cost? Talvik challenged. We don't have the luxury of choice. Jessa shot back, her voice sharp. The Xanthe Empire will wipe us out completely if we don't act now. If this captain can help us win, then we need to put aside our doubts and move forward. Her calm officer spoke again, interrupting the silence that had descended upon the room. Admiral, there's another transmission. This time, it's a direct line to us from the Vanguard. Jessa took a steadying breath, put it through. The same face appeared on the screen, but this time the captain's tone was more forceful, more immediate. Admiral Kale, we have detected a major movement of Xanthe reinforcements headed your way. If you wish to survive, you need to make your decision now. My ship is capable of handling the Xanthe fleet on its own, but I can't risk the loss of your forces. I'm sending coordinates. If you're serious about this, meet us there. We'll provide air cover while you mobilize. Without waiting for a response, the transmission ended. Jessa's mind raced. This wasn't just a plea for help. It was a command wrapped in an ultimatum. The human captain didn't seem concerned with gaining their approval, and yet his knowledge and power were undeniable. The Xanthe Empire would certainly destroy what was left of the Federation if they didn't act quickly. We move now, Jessa ordered, her voice sharp with resolve. Prepare the fleet for immediate departure. We're heading to the coordinates the Vanguard provided. Her officers didn't question her, but she could see the uncertainty in their eyes. They had no idea what they were walking into. Neither did she. But one thing was clear. The human ship was offering them a chance, perhaps their last chance, at survival. Whether they trusted it or not, they had no other option. As the command deck came alive with activity, Jessa glanced once more at the empty screen where Captain Pierce had appeared. She didn't know what to expect when they reached the human warship, but one thing was certain. The galaxy was no longer as it once was, and the future now rested in the hands of a single, mysterious human captain. And she was going to find out what he truly intended, whether he could be trusted or whether the Federation was walking straight into another trap. The Federation fleet dropped out of hyperspace just outside the coordinates given by Captain Aiden Pierce. The stars ahead were stark and cold, casting their distant light over a scene that felt like a strange dream. There, floating in the emptiness, was a Vanguard, its massive, angular shape silhouetted against the backdrop of a dying star. Its presence was imposing, dominating the space around it as if it were a harbinger of something far greater. Admiral Jessa Kale's hands were steady on the console, but her mind was not. 1,000 questions swirled in her thoughts as she stared at the human warship. How had this lone ship managed to outfight the Empire? How had humanity, whose entire presence had once been lost to galaxy, risen to such power in secret? And most troubling of all, why had they chosen now to reveal themselves? The Federation fleet, a motley group of damaged vessels, hovered nervously at a distance, waiting for orders. Jessa didn't want to admit it, but they were terrified, not of the Xanthe Empire, of course not, but of this unknown, unpredictable force that had entered the war like a storm. Admiral, Commander Talvik spoke up, his voice strained. Are we sure about this? We're not even sure who this guy really is. He could be. I know, Jessa interrupted, her gaze never leaving the Vanguard. But we're running out of options. The Xanthe are closing in on us. If we don't take a chance now, we won't have a fleet left to defend. Talvik didn't argue, but the look on his face said it all. Trust wasn't something easily earned, especially not after everything they'd been through. A communications officer cleared his throat. Admiral, Captain Pierce's ship is requesting immediate contact. They're opening a channel. Jessa leaned forward, her brow furrowing. Put him through? The screen flickered before settling into clarity, and once again, the stern face of Captain Aiden Pierce appeared. His expression was unreadable, but there was a slight edge to his voice that suggested he, too, was keenly aware of the stakes. Admiral Kale, he said, his tone firm but not unkind. I trust you're prepared. The Empire won't hesitate to strike as soon as they see us together. They've been tracking us for days. We're ready, Jessa replied, though the words fell hollow. Were they really ready? She wasn't sure, but she had no choice. "We're prepared to follow your lead, Captain." Pierce nodded, but his eyes never left the screen. "Good. Stay sharp. We planned a series of coordinated strikes. We take out their frontline defenses first. You handle the rest." "What's the plan for after?" Jessa asked, the weight of decision sinking deeper into her bones. "Once we hit them, how do we ensure they don't counterattack in full force?" "There's no guarantee they won't," Pierce admitted, a flicker of something darker passing across his face. "But if we do this right, we can cripple their command structure. We go after their supply lines, their control hubs. Without that, their fleet becomes nothing but an empty shell, a weak, disorganized mess. We'll strike at the heart, and if we're lucky, they won't have the means to retaliate." A heavy silence fell between them, the weight of those words pressing on Jess's chest. No one had ever taken a fight to the Xanthe Empire like this, targeting their infrastructure, their lifeblood. No one had dared. "And if we're not lucky," she asked, the question a quiet breath. "If we're not lucky," Pierce said, his eyes narrowing slightly, "then we fight like hell anyway." Jessa held his gaze, reading between the lines. He wasn't just a captain. He was a soldier, one who had seen the horrors of war and was willing to face even worse odds. But there was something more there, too, a quiet, unspoken determination that held the galaxy together even as it burned. "Understood," Jessa said, a new resolve settling within her. "We're with you. Let's do this." The transmission ended, and Jessa stood up from her seat. The crew was already moving, coordinated with the Vanguard, getting their fleet into position. There was no time for second-guessing. The Xanthe Empire was no longer the unstoppable force it had once seemed to be, but that didn't mean they weren't dangerous. They were still the most formidable power in the galaxy, and they would retaliate with all the fury of a wounded animal. "All ships, prepare for combat," Jessa commanded. "Engage the enemy on my mark." Her voice was steady, but inside she felt a storm raging. Trust was a fragile thing, and she had just handed it to a stranger with little more than a promise. But the Federation was out of time. They had no choice but to follow this man and his ship into the fire. The Xanthe forces would arrive soon, and when they did, there could be no hesitation. They would fight, together, or not at all. As the Federation fleet aligned with the Vanguard and prepared to move into position, Jessa caught sight of something on her display, a mass of Xanthe ships appearing on the edge of the system. The first wave. "Prepare yourselves," she muttered under her breath. "This is it." The Vanguard lit up with energy, its immense weapons powering to life. For the first time in a long time, Jessa allowed herself to believe that the tide of this war might actually be turning. With humanity's warship at their side, perhaps, just perhaps, the galaxy could find its way back from the brink. And as the first shots fired across the darkness of space, she knew the true battle was finally beginning. The battlefield was chaos. The Federation fleet had barely formed up when the first wave of Xanthe ships slammed into them with the force of a tidal wave. Energy blasts tore through the darkness, lighting up the void with bursts of fiery destruction. The Vanguard surged forward, its weapons dishing out destruction with precise, lethal intent, while its massive hull seemed to defy the barrage of enemy fire. Its movements were smooth, controlled, almost as if it were a part of the very fabric of space itself. Admiral Jessa Kale gripped the arms of her command chair, eyes fixed on the tactical display. Her fleet was holding its own, but just barely. They were outgunned, outmanned. The Xanthe Empire had numbers on their side, vast, overwhelming fleets, but the Vanguard was something else entirely. Each shot it fired seemed to decimate entire swaths of Xanthe ships, their formations crumbling under the sheer power of a human warship's weapons. "Status report," Jessa barked, her voice calm but sharp. "Federation ships holding steady, Admiral," replied her comms officer. "But we're taking heavy casualties. The Xanthe are relentless. We need more time." Jessa's heart raced. She had no illusions about the odds. The Xanthe were formidable, but they weren't invincible. Not anymore. If they could keep pushing, if they could just hold out a little longer, the Vanguard might be able to break through the enemy's defenses. But time was running out. "Captain Pierce," she said, tapping into the private comm channel. We're in position. Ready when you are. The response came through quickly. Hold your ground. Admiral will do the heavy lifting. Just give us an opening. The Vanguard moved like a predator, weaving through enemy fire, its weapons raking across the Xanthe fleet in a symphony of destruction. It was an awe-inspiring sight, yet Jessa couldn't shake the feeling that they were pushing their luck. The Federation fleet had its own formidable ships, but they couldn't match the sheer firepower or maneuverability of the Vanguard. And soon, the Xanthe reinforcements would arrive, more than they could ever handle. Admiral, Commander Talvik called from station. The Xanthe are regrouping. They're shifting to a more aggressive formation. They're preparing for a counterattack. Understood, Jessa replied, her mind calculating the next move. They were running out of options. All ships, hold formation. We need to buy ourselves some time. She knew they couldn't hold forever. They were outclassed, outnumbered, and the Xanthe Empire was relentless. But if there was one thing Jess understood, it was this. They couldn't afford to let fear take hold. Fear was for the defeated. Captain Pierce, she spoke again into the comms, her voice steady but with an edge of urgency. This is our last shot. The Xanthe reinforcements are on the way. We can't afford to wait any longer. There was a long pause, a moment that felt like an eternity. Then Captain Pierce's voice came through, calm as ever. Do it now. Without another word, Jessa gave the order. All ships, prepare to engage. Target the Xanthe command ships. Focus fire. Do not break formation. The fleet responded with grim determination, their weapons flaring to life as they opened fire on the incoming Xanthe forces. But it wasn't enough. The enemy's ships were too numerous, their fire too overwhelming. Jessa could feel the weight of their loss pressing down on her with each passing second. The Vanguard was cutting through them, yes, but there were too many Xanthe ships, too many targets. Even a human warship couldn't be everywhere at once. Then, as if summoned by fate itself, the opening Jessa had been waiting for appeared. A gap in the Xanthe formation, a brief moment of weakness. The Vanguard took it without hesitation, tearing through the enemy lines with ferocity that seemed almost supernatural. Ships exploded in blinding flashes as a human warship carved its way toward the heart of the Xanthe fleet, unyielding and unstoppable. Now! Jessa shouted, her voice raw with urgency. Her fleet surged forward, weapons blazing, taking advantage of the opening the Vanguard had created. The Xanthe fleet reeled, their formation crumbling as they tried to regroup. But it was too late. The Federation ships, emboldened by the Vanguard's assault, began to push back. The Xanthe were no longer the unstoppable juggernaut they had once been. Jessa watched as the tide of battle shifted. Federation ships broke through the enemy lines, targeting critical command nodes and supply ships. With each destroyed Xanthe vessel, the Empire's power began to weaken. But it wasn't enough yet. The real battle, the one that would decide the fate of the galaxy, was still to come. Admiral, Talvik called out, the Xanthe fleet is breaking. They're retreating. Jessa's heart skipped a beat, but she didn't let herself relax. The Xanthe had done this before, retreated to lick their wounds and regroup. The war wasn't over. Not yet. Don't let up, she ordered. Chase them down. We finished this today. As her fleet advanced, the Vanguard moved ahead of them, cutting through the remnant of the enemy fleet with brutal efficiency. But even as they pushed forward, Jessa couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The Xanthe Empire would regroup, they would rebuild, and they would come again, harder and faster than before. The victory they had just won was significant, but it was not final. The galaxy was still a powder keg, waiting for the next spark to set off. Admiral, her comms officer interrupted. We got something on sensors. A massive fleet, more than we anticipated. The Xanthe are bringing reinforcements. Jessa's gut tightened. She had been waiting for this. But the fight was far from over, and they were not done yet. With the Vanguard at their side, they had a chance, just a chance, to break the Xanthe Empire for good. We're not finished yet, she said, her voice firm. Get ready. This is where it counts. And as the vast, unrelenting wave of Xanthe ships appeared on the horizon, Jessa Kao stood resolute. The war for the galaxy was not over. But now, with humanity's warship at their side, they had a fighting chance. And that was something the galaxy had not seen in a long time. You said,